In the radiant heart of the ancient land of Okuta, where rivers shimmered like polished silver and every dawn broke with the promise of vanity, beauty was not merely admired, it was worshipped. The people of Okuta believed that a person's reflection in water revealed the truth of their soul. If your image rippled with light, you were pure. If it darkened or distorted, the gods had turned away from you. It was a kingdom built on mirrors and illusions, where ponds, polished stones, and even bowls of water were treated as sacred instruments of truth. No one dared to walk past a still pool without gazing into it, whispering a silent prayer that their reflection would smile back, unmarred and perfect. Among these people lived Nia, the 24-year-old daughter of the late Queen Abene. Unlike others who spent hours gazing at their own faces, Nia found beauty not in reflection but in kindness. Her eyes carried the same soft amber glow her mother once had, and her smile brought calm to those in pain. When Queen Abene died, the kingdom dimmed, even the rivers lost some of their shine. King Duro, broken and vulnerable, soon remarried Lady Sephu, a woman whose beauty was whispered about in distant lands. Her skin was smooth as river clay, her hair darker than midnight, and her eyes glimmered with the sharpness of glass. The people said she never aged, that time bent its knee before her face. At first, Nia welcomed her stepmother with open arms. She believed in family, in second chances, in the kindness that bound hearts together. But from the day Lady Sephu entered the palace, something in the air changed. The scent of herbs and roses was replaced by strange perfumes that made servants dizzy. The palace mirrors, once clear, began to ripple with faint distortions whenever Sephu walked by. Birds no longer nested near her chambers, and the royal cat hissed and vanished whenever she appeared. King Duro, blinded by his longing for peace, saw none of this. He looked only at her unaging face and thanked the gods for granting him new joy. Lady Sephu, however, carried a secret darker than any shadow in Okuta. Beneath her radiant beauty was an ancient hunger, a pact made long before she entered the kingdom. Each moon cycle, she stood before a mirror carved from volcanic glass, whispering incantations older than the kingdom itself. Her reflection would shimmer, and a voice from beyond would demand the price of her eternal youth. Blood, but not just any blood. It had to be the blood of the pure, the kind untainted by malice or vanity, the kind that glowed with innocence when touched by moonlight. For years she had sustained herself by taking drops from travelers, orphans, and maidens who would never be missed. But now, as her power began to wane, her reflection trembled and cracked, and the whisper from the mirror grew louder, crueler, hungrier. When she looked upon Nia, radiant in simplicity, kindness glowing like gold beneath her skin, Lady Sephu felt both envy and temptation twist within her. The girl's reflection never wavered in the water. It shone with light so pure that even the mirror spirits would pause in awe. To Sephu, Nia was no longer just a stepdaughter, she was salvation. Each night, Sephu stood before her mirror, tracing her perfect face with trembling fingers as cracks began to form along her cheeks, like fine threads of age daring to emerge. "Only one drop," she whispered to her reflection, "only one drop from her will make me whole again." And as the moon climbed higher above Okuta, its light fell upon Nia's window, where she slept peacefully, unaware that her beauty, her very purity, had become the most dangerous thing in the kingdom of mirrors. Lady Sephu awoke one dawn to find her mirror lying silent. For years, it had greeted her with songs of praise, showing a face untouched by time, a beauty that mocked mortality. But now the basin of obsidian water, her spirit mirror, stared back at her with stillness so deep it felt like judgment. The surface quivered, and when she leaned closer she saw it, a faint crack crawling across the reflection of her cheek. Her heart seized. She pressed trembling fingers against her skin, but it was smooth. Only the mirror showed the truth, the first whisper of decay. In panic, she called for the incense, the dark oil, and the silver knife she kept hidden behind her silken veils. As she dripped blood from her own finger into the basin, the water hissed and turned the color of storm clouds. Then came the voice, low and ancient, older than the kingdom itself. It slithered from the mirror like smoke. "Your beauty withers, Sephu of Okuta," it said. "The years are knocking. You have delayed their entry too long." Her breath quickened. "No," she pleaded, "I have given the blood, the offerings. I have kept the pact." The voice laughed, a brittle, echoing sound. "What you have given is weak. You feed me the blood of strangers, the forgotten. I crave purity, light unbroken by sin. Only that can seal your reflection once more." The water rippled violently, and then the image of Nia appeared within it, asleep in her chamber, a soft glow radiating from her skin. Her mother's blessing still lingered in her veins, A divine light passed down from Queen Ebony, whose kindness had once turned the rains merciful and whose tears were said to heal wounds. "Her blood," whispered the spirit. "Her light will feed me. One drop and your beauty will be reborn. Delay and you will age into dust." Sephu's breath caught between fear and fascination. She gazed at Nia's reflection, the glow that seemed almost holy. For a moment she hesitated. The girl had never shown her cruelty. She spoke softly, smiled often, and treated Sephu with a respect she did not deserve. But envy is a poison that rots compassion first. Each passing hour she watched her reflection fade, her lips losing color, her hair dulling, faint lines creeping like cracks beneath her eyes. The courtiers whispered that she looked tired. Even the king, in his affection, asked if she was unwell. And that question, that small well-meaning question, became the spark that ignited her rage. One evening, under the crimson wash of sunset, Sephu approached King Duro. She came to him in tears, draped in white silk, her beauty now artfully shadowed by candlelight to hide the flaws time had begun to etch. "My lord," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I fear there is darkness in your daughter." The king's brow furrowed. "Darkness? Speak plainly, Sephu." She bowed her head, tears falling like jewels. "I have seen it, in the mirrors. Her mother's spirit is angry. The queen's blessing curdled when she died. The girl carries a curse of reflection. Each time she gazes upon her image, the spirits stir." King Duro, weary and burdened by grief, listened with the same trust that had once blinded him to Ebony's sickness. He believed Sephu's words not because they made sense, but because they came from the lips he adored. That night, he ordered that Nia's mirrors be covered with cloth, fearing that unseen forces whispered through them. Servants murmured in confusion, but no one dared question the queen. Nia, bewildered by her father's sudden change, obeyed. But curiosity gnawed at her heart. Late one night, when moonlight poured like liquid glass across her chamber floor, she pulled away the cloth from her small mirror. What she saw made her freeze. Symbols, thin, red, glowing lines, had appeared across its surface, pulsing faintly. When she leaned closer, her reflection did not mimic her movements. It blinked when she did not. Its lips moved before hers. Then, in a whisper that came not from her own throat but from within the mirror, it spoke, "Beware the woman who drinks your light." Nia stumbled back, heart pounding. The reflection smiled sadly, its eyes filled with sorrow. "Your blood is sought. The darkness knows your name." The mirror trembled, the symbols flaring brighter before fading into nothingness. Nia clutched the edges of the table, her breath ragged. Outside her window, the palace torches flickered, as if the night itself had heard the warning. From the chamber below, Lady Sephu gazed into her own basin, where the water shimmered once more with youth, faint, temporary, and stolen. But the voice within the mirror warned her too, its tone laced with malice. "Every drop you take," it said, "plants a shadow that will one day rise." And as the moon slipped behind the clouds, two mirrors, one of purity, one of hunger, waited for their fates to collide. The moon festival arrived like a dream painted in silver and fire. In the kingdom of Okuta, every year's festival honored the first full moon of harvest, when the river shimmered like glass and lanterns were sent floating into the night sky to thank the gods for life, love and light. This year the celebration was grander than ever. Lady Sephu had announced that she would crown Princess Nia as the Daughter of Light, claiming it was to honor the memory of Queen Ebony and bless the next generation with her radiance. The people rejoiced and King Duro beamed with pride. To them it was a symbol of unity. To Sephu it was an exquisite lie. From early morning the palace shimmered with movement. Servants carried silks and spices, musicians tuned their harps, and the scent of incense floated through the halls like a gentle enchantment. Sephu dressed herself in gold, each jewel chosen carefully to reflect the moon's pale glow. Her mirror spirit had been restless for nights, whispering its hunger. "Feed me," it hissed, its voice curling through her mind like smoke. "Feed me her light before the moon fades." And so she would, in plain sight of the gods and her people. When Nia entered the courtyard, even the torches seemed to bow. She wore a gown of ivory, woven with threads that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Her beauty was quiet, the kind that did not demand attention but drew it naturally as dawn draws the eye from night. She smiled softly at Sephu, unaware that her stepmother's fingers tightened around the ceremonial dagger hidden beneath her flowing sleeves. The courtyard filled with music, drums like heartbeats, flutes singing to the sky. The moon hung directly above, full and watching. Sephu raised her hands, her voice carrying through the crowd. "Tonight we honor the bloodline of light. Tonight, We crown Princess Nia as the daughter of light, the bearer of Queen Abeni's blessing." The people cheered, tossing petals into the air. Nia stepped forward, bowing gracefully. Sephu placed a golden circlet on her head, but beneath her fingers she felt the pulse of the girl's life, the warmth of purity she had coveted for so long. As she lifted Nia's hand for the ritual blessing, no one noticed the glint of a tiny silver pin in her ring. "A blessing from the moon," Sephu whispered, and pressed the ring gently into Nia's palm. A faint gasp escaped Nia's lips as the metal pierced her skin. A single drop of blood fell, striking the marble floor. But before it could dry, Sephu subtly tilted her hand, catching the drop in a small vial hidden within her sleeve. The spirit mirror inside her chamber stirred at once. Even from afar, it could smell the purity. The crowd continued to cheer as Sephu embraced her stepdaughter, hiding her trembling excitement. The moonlight dimmed for an instant, as if something sacred had been disturbed. A cold wind swept through the courtyard, extinguishing several torches. The musicians faltered. Then Nia swayed on her feet, her face pale as snow. "Father," she whispered faintly. Her knees gave way and she collapsed into Sephu's arms. Panic rippled through the crowd. King Duro rushed forward, shouting her name, but Sephu raised a hand, her expression a perfect mask of sorrow. "Do not fear, my lord," she said gently. "The daughter of light has received too much divine power. She only needs rest." Before anyone could question her, she called for the healers and ordered Nia carried away, not to her chambers but down into the forgotten cellar beneath the old wing of the palace, where cobwebs and dust muffled sound and time itself seemed asleep. There, she laid the unconscious princess upon a stone bed and whispered to the shadows, "Sleep now, child of light. Sleep while I borrow what you no longer need." That night, when all of Okuta danced and drank under the moon, Sephu descended alone into the cellar. She carried the spirit mirror in her hands, its surface now trembling with anticipation. Nia's pale form lay still, her breath soft but alive. Sephu pricked the princess's palm again, collecting the crimson drops in a golden bowl. The mirror's surface rippled as the first drop touched it, and the spirit's voice rose, deep and hungry. "Yes, this is the light I crave." As the ritual began, the mirror's water shimmered, reflecting not Sephu's fading face, but a radiant mask of youth, her youth restored. The wrinkles smoothed, her eyes brightened, her lips filled with color. She laughed softly, gazing at herself with the intoxicated wonder of one reborn. Each night thereafter she returned to the cellar, drawing drop after drop from Nia's hand, feeding her beauty ritual while whispering lies to King Duro that the princess was ill and must not be disturbed. In the court above, the king grew restless but obeyed Sephu's plea. "She needs the silence," Sephu said, her voice honeyed with false grief. "The light within her burns too brightly, we must shield her from the world." And so the palace moved on, blind to the quiet horror buried beneath it. Yet far below, in that shadowed cellar, something stirred each time her blood fell into the mirror, a flicker of light that refused to die. For though Sephu thought she was draining life, she was planting vengeance. Each drop of Nia's blood that touched the cold stone shimmered faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat, as if something unseen was waiting to be born. The first thing Nia felt was the weight of cold iron biting into her wrists. Her eyes fluttered open, greeted by a suffocating darkness broken only by a pale slice of moonlight filtering through a crack in the ceiling. The air was thick, heavy with damp stone, the scent of metal, and something faintly sweet, like dying roses left too long in water. When she tried to move, the chains rattled softly, echoing like ghosts across the cellar walls. Her body ached. Her veins felt hollow, her heart beat shallow, as though something precious had been steadily drained from her. She turned her head and saw it, the basin. It rested upon a stone pedestal a few steps away, shimmering faintly. The surface of the liquid inside rippled, even though the air was still. It wasn't water. It was thicker, darker. And when the moonlight touched it, the reflection shone red, her own blood. A sudden memory surged back. Sephu's gentle smile at the festival, the sharp sting in her palm, the darkness that had swallowed her. Nia's heart pounded weakly in her chest. She whispered, "Stepmother," but the word broke apart in the silence, devoured by the shadows. For hours, or perhaps days, she could no longer tell, Nia hung between sleep and waking, drifting in and out of pain. Sometimes she thought she heard footsteps above, the faint echo of laughter from the world that had forgotten her. Other times, only the dripping sound of her own blood sliding from her wound into the bowl below. Drip, drip. Each sound was a heartbeat outside her body, steady and endless. Then one night, when the moon rose high and silver beams crept across the cellar floor, the sound changed. The drops began to hum. It was faint at first, a vibration more felt than heard, but soon the air itself trembled with a strange melody. Nia blinked through her exhaustion, staring at the basin. The blood glowed faintly red against the blue-gray shadows. The ripples formed patterns like small hands pressing against the surface from beneath. Her breath caught. She thought her mind was slipping into madness, but the hum grew stronger, clearer, until she could make out words within it, not spoken but sung, soft and childlike. "Mother?" Nia froze. Her lips parted and tears welled in her eyes. "Who's there?" she whispered. Again the sound came, this time from the droplets falling from her hand onto the floor. Where they landed, the stones shimmered faintly. Each drop spread into a glowing mark, tiny and pulsating like a heartbeat. Slowly the marks began to form faint shapes, small figures, fragile and incomplete, their edges made of crimson light. They looked like children made of mist and blood, curling toward her in reverence. "Mother," they whispered again, their voices overlapping like a soft choir. "You are hurt. You are bound. But we are born from you." Nia trembled, unsure whether to cry or pray. Her voice cracked. "What are you?" "We are your tears turned to flesh," they murmured. "We are the pain that will not die. We are what she has stolen, and what she cannot keep." Nia's heart clenched with both fear and awe. She watched as one of the figures reached out a tiny hand, touching her ankle where the chain met her skin. The metal hissed softly as though recoiling from the touch. For a moment the link glowed faintly red, then dimmed again. "Please," Nia whispered. "Help me. I am so weak." But the glowing children only tilted their heads, their forms flickering like candlelight in the wind. "Not yet, mother," they sang. "You must sleep. We are still growing." She tried to stay awake, to understand, but her body felt like it was made of lead. The warmth of their glow soothed her like a lullaby, and her eyes slowly closed. Even as she drifted into unconsciousness, she could still hear their whispers, faint, loving, eerie. When she awoke again, time had shifted. The cellar felt warmer, pulsing faintly with a strange life. On the floor, the blood marks had multiplied. Dozens of them now glowed softly, each forming tiny outlines of faces that seemed to watch her. The air was thick with an otherworldly heartbeat, as though the darkness itself was breathing. Nia's body was frail, yet within her chest a quiet strength began to stir, a defiance born from sorrow and pain. She bowed her head and began to pray, her voice trembling. "Mother of light, if you still see me, grant me strength. Let my blood not be wasted." The moment she spoke those words, the glowing shapes shimmered brighter, their whispers harmonizing into a single tone, a sound that vibrated through her bones. The basin rippled violently, as though the spirit trapped inside it had felt her prayer. Unseen by Sephu above, the magic she thought she controlled had turned on her. Each drop of blood she stole was becoming something else, something alive. In the shadows of that cellar, Nia's blood was no longer just blood. It was memory. It was life. And it was vengeance, forming quietly, heartbeat by heartbeat, waiting for the moment when pain would bloom into power. Thunder rolled like an angry god above the palace, shaking the ancient stones of Okuta to their roots. The storm had come suddenly, splitting the heavens with silver veins of lightning that flickered through the cracks of the old cellar ceiling. Rain poured down in torrents, and each drop that seeped through the cracks mingled with the traces of Nia's blood on the floor, awakening something that had been waiting, breathing, in silence. Nia stirred where she lay, her head heavy, her skin cold as marble. For 7 nights she had hung between worlds, half in waking, half in dream. The whispers that had once soothed her now hummed with energy, restless, eager. The faint red marks scattered across the cellar floor began to pulse faster, glowing like embers beneath a wind's breath. Her vision blurred as she lifted her gaze toward the basin. The liquid inside it shimmered violently, rippling as though something beneath it struggled to surface. Then the air shifted. A deep vibration spread through the stone floor, and the smell of iron grew sharp, choking. The blood that had dried along the cracks began to flow again, glistening fresh. Nia's wound reopened on its own, but she felt no pain, only a strange warmth spreading through her body, as if her heart was beating outside of her chest. The wind howled through the cellar vents, and lightning struck close enough to make the walls tremble. In that flash, the entire room ignited with crimson light. It wasn't fire, it was blood transformed into brilliance, glowing with unnatural life. The basin overflowed, spilling liquid light that slithered across the floor like serpents seeking shape. Nia gasped as she watched the blood gather into small pools that began to rise, trembling, lifting from the ground like droplets defying gravity. They swirled together, forming faint outlines, fragile bodies, small limbs, wide eyes of molten red. One by one, they took form until 12 figures stood before her, their skin dark red and shimmering as though lit from within. The cellar walls pulsed with their breath, and their eyes glowed brighter than the storm outside. For a long, trembling moment, Nia could not move. The chains at her wrists clinked softly, the sound dwarfed by the hum of life that now filled the room. The 12 beings looked upon her with faces both innocent and ancient, their gazes reflecting centuries of pain and power. Then in perfect unison they spoke, their voices one and many, soft and thunderous all at once. "You bled so we may rise." Nia's breath caught in her throat. Her heart thundered painfully. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice breaking like thin glass. The tallest of the blood children stepped forward, a boy no older than 12, though his eyes burned with the knowledge of ages. His voice echoed through the cellar. "We are your sorrow given shape. We are the blood she stole now returned to you. We are vengeance born from love, from pain, from every drop you shed in silence." Nia shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "No," she whispered weakly. "You can't be real, you can't." But the children smiled, not cruelly but with a sadness that made her heart ache. "You prayed for strength, mother," another said, a girl whose hair glimmered like liquid ruby. "And the heavens answered through your blood. We came from your suffering, and we will carry your justice." The air seemed to tighten, vibrating with their energy. The chains binding Nia glowed briefly, and for the first time she felt the weight of her imprisonment loosen slightly. The children turned their eyes toward the ceiling, where faint rumblings from above marked the steps of Sephu's attendants moving through the palace. The smallest of the 12 reached out and touched Nia's hand, her fingers tiny yet warm as fire. "Do not fear us. We are yours and we are hers undoing." Lightning split the sky again, the flash so bright that for an instant, the cellar became a room of glass and light. When Nia's vision cleared, she gasped. The children were no longer shapes of mist. They stood fully formed, draped in tattered strands of starlight and blood. Their eyes burned brighter than flame, and their reflections shone faintly in the basin's surface, though no mirror should have caught such light. "What will you do?" Nia whispered, her voice trembling between awe and terror. They turned to her in perfect harmony, their voices blending into a single tone that shook the stone walls. "We will return what was taken. We will make her beauty reflect her deeds." And before she could speak again, they stepped back into the shadows. Their bodies dissolved into streams of red light, sliding upward through the cracks, vanishing one by one as though the storm itself had called them away. The cellar fell silent once more, save for the sound of rain and Nia's unsteady breathing. Her wrists still bore the chains, but now they felt weightless. Her heart, once hollow, pulsed with strange new life. She looked at the basin, its once hungry glow was gone, drained. Yet deep within the red surface, faint ripples moved outward, as if echoing a distant heartbeat. Above, thunder rumbled again, not from the sky but from within the palace itself. And in that sound, Nia thought she heard voices, the soft laughter of children carried on the wind. She closed her eyes, a single tear tracing her cheek. Her blood had been stolen to feed vanity, but it had bloomed into power, and her vengeance now had 12 small glowing faces. Morning broke over Okuta like a false dawn, bright and beautiful, yet carrying something wrong beneath its glow. The palace shimmered with gold light, its banners fluttering proudly as villagers gathered to glimpse their queen. Lady Sephu stepped onto the royal balcony, draped in silver silk that caught the sun like spun fire. Her skin glowed, flawless and smooth as if carved from moonstone. Her eyes, dark and glimmering, seemed to hold both youth and secrets. Gasps rose from the crowd. "The queen has been blessed again," they cried. "The gods have restored her beauty." Sephu smiled sweetly, basking in their adoration. She raised her jeweled hand in a graceful wave, but behind the serene curve of her lips lay hunger, the kind that fed on praise, on envy, on power. Inside, she could still feel the warmth of Nia's blood burning faintly beneath her skin, a secret river of stolen light. Each morning, when she gazed into her mirror, the reflection showed perfection. Her cheeks flush, her eyes clear, her youth unshaken. The spirit mirror purred its approval, whispering, "You have fed me well." But not all reflections obeyed her. In the wells scattered across Okuta, in the still ponds where villagers washed their clothes, her face would sometimes appear unbidden. Not radiant, but twisted. The features warped, the eyes hollow, the lips bleeding shadows. Farmers whispered that the queen's reflection was cursed. Beauty like that must cost something, one muttered, drawing a charm in the dirt. The gods don't give without taking. The animals felt it first. Horses reared at her passing, their eyes rolling white. Dogs whined and refused to look toward the palace. Even the birds that once nested in the royal gardens took flight, circling the skies as if warning the heavens. Sephu noticed, and hated it. At night, she ordered the stable hands to silence any creature that dared make noise near her chamber. By dawn the courtyard would be quiet again, too quiet. King Duro, once proud and strong, began to fade like a shadow in twilight. He spent most of his days in his chambers, pale and trembling, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. The healers could find no cause for his sickness. "It is grief," Sephu would say softly, pressing a cool hand to his brow. "He mourns his lost daughter." Yet, as she spoke, faint trails of light flowed from his skin to her fingers, the invisible threads of a spell that bound his life to hers. The more he weakened, the stronger her beauty grew. The kingdom adored her still, though unease rippled beneath their admiration. Strange stories began to spread from the forests surrounding Okuta. Hunters spoke of figures glimpsed between the trees, small, swift, and glowing red in the night. One returned pale and trembling, claiming he had seen a child with eyes like burning coals staring at him from beneath a tree. "They laughed," he said, voice shaking. "Children, but not children." Their laughter froze the wind. Villagers began locking their doors before dusk, whispering prayers to ward off the red-eyed spirits. The old women of the market muttered that the forest had awakened, that Queen Sephu's rituals had angered something older than gods. Sephu laughed when she heard the rumors. "Superstition," she told her attendants, brushing her mirror's surface with her fingers. "Fear makes fools of peasants." But that night, as she sat alone before the mirror, brushing her dark hair, she felt a chill creep through the room. The candles flickered. The mirror rippled as though disturbed by invisible hands. "Spirit," she whispered, her voice careful. "Why do you tremble?" The reflection stared back, perfect and still, then smiled without her. The movement was slight, almost playful, but enough to make her freeze. A faint giggle echoed from deep within the glass, high and childish, layered with more than one voice. Her hand dropped the brush. It clattered to the floor. "Who's there?" she hissed. Her own reflection tilted its head, the smile widening just a little too far. The candlelight shifted, and for a heartbeat she saw shapes, 12 small silhouettes moving behind her reflection. Tiny hands pressed against the glass, leaving red smears that pulsed faintly before fading. "No," she whispered, backing away. "It's impossible. She's gone." The giggles came again, soft and echoing, like a dozen children playing hide-and-seek in a room without corners. Her reflection began to blur, her face twisting into something unfamiliar, a cracked mask of beauty stretched thin over rot. "Mother of mirrors," the faint voices whispered from the glass, "your children are awake." Sephu screamed and covered the mirror with a silk cloth, her heart racing like a trapped bird's. The sound died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, waiting. She forced herself to laugh, brittle, desperate. "Just tricks," she muttered. "Just tricks of exhaustion." But as she turned to leave, the silk shifted slightly, not from wind but from within. And beneath the fabric, faint crimson light pulsed like a heartbeat. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the forest beyond the palace swayed without wind. In the darkness between the trees, 12 pairs of glowing eyes opened in unison. They watched the palace quietly, their laughter carried on the night air like a forgotten lullaby. Sephu lay awake until dawn, staring at the covered mirror, her beauty perfect and her heart hollow, as the voices of her vengeance whispered lullabies from the other side of the glass. Night had become a thing of fear in Okuta. Once, the palace glowed with candlelight and laughter, but now the air hung thick with dread. Even the servants whispered prayers before walking the halls, for something unseen had begun to stir when the sun dipped beyond the hills. The blood children had awakened, and their vengeance was quiet, deliberate, and cruel. It began with small things. Sephu's perfumes, once fragrant with rare blossoms and honeyed oils, turned rancid overnight. When she lifted the bottle to her wrist, the scent that rose was coppery, thick with the unmistakable tang of blood. She hurled it across the room in disgust, the glass shattering, but when the servants cleaned the floor, they found the liquid had vanished, leaving only small hand-shaped stains that bled slowly through the tiles. Her mirror, her most precious possession, darkened next. The silvered surface grew cloudy, refusing to reflect her face. She scrubbed it with oils, with tears, with chants, but it remained a black pool, swallowing light instead of giving it back. At night, she heard whispers slithering from it. Voices that called her name softly, like a child coaxing its mother to play. Sephu, they sang. Mother of mirrors, do you love us still? Her sleep grew haunted. Each time she closed her eyes, she dreamed of the forest where Nia's blood had been spilled. The earth there pulsed red, and from it small figures crawled, 12 children, their forms both human and other. Their eyes glowed like embers, their laughter echoing in her skull. She would wake gasping, her heart pounding, her bedsheets damp with sweat and blood that wasn't her own. The first child revealed itself not in form but in sensation. One evening as she dined alone, a sudden heat flared up her arm, searing through her veins like molten iron. She screamed, overturning the goblet of wine, watching as her skin reddened with invisible fire. No flame touched her, yet the pain was real, unbearable. When it passed, her arm bore faint scorch marks shaped like a child's hand. The second came with frost. She was walking through the garden when the air turned sharp and brittle, her breath fogging before her eyes though the night was warm. Her jewelry frosted over, the petals of the roses froze solid. Then she saw them, tiny footprints forming in the frost, circling her, closing in. She fled back inside, her gown trailing shards of ice that melted into crimson stains. The third child appeared through tears. Sephu woke to the sound of crying, soft, rhythmic sobs. Searching her room, she found nothing, until she looked down and saw droplets on the marble floor. Each tear shimmered red. She watched, horrified, as they sprouted small thorns that snaked toward her bare feet. She screamed and leapt back, summoning guards who found only wilted vines and a single whisper in the air, "We remember." Fear began to consume her. The queen who had once ruled with calm and poise now paced the corridors, her eyes wild, her robes disheveled. The servants avoided her gaze, for in the flicker of torchlight, her reflection sometimes moved before she did. At night, she tore through the library's forbidden tomes, muttering incantations in the old tongue. Blood was spilled, candles burned black, and the palace filled with the scent of iron and smoke. "Spirits of the mirror," she cried during one midnight ritual, her hands slick with sacrifice. "I command you, leave me be." But the shadows only stirred. The air grew colder. From the darkened mirror, faint shapes began to form, the outlines of small faces pressing against the glass. Their eyes glowed, their mouths smiled, and their laughter filled the room. "Every spell you cast," they whispered, "feeds us." The mirror cracked, veins of darkness spreading across it like a spider's web. Sephu stumbled back, clutching her chest. Her reflection shimmered, young, beautiful, and dying. She could feel her strength draining, her stolen youth trembling beneath her skin. Meanwhile, far beyond the palace walls, Nia stirred in her grave of shadows. Her spirit had been bound, her body left cold, but now warmth began to seep through her veins. The air around her shimmered faintly, her wounds glowing with faint crimson light. She could feel them, the blood children, and through their vengeance, power flowed back into her. Each time they whispered in Sephu's dreams, Nia's heart beat a little stronger. Each time they struck, her broken soul stitched itself back together. In the silence of the spirit realm, Nia opened her eyes, the same red as the children who bore her pain, and smiled faintly. "The blood remembers," she murmured, her voice echoing softly through the dark. "And it comes home." Back in the palace, Sephu sat trembling before the broken mirror, her reflection fractured into 12 shards, and in each one a child's face smiled back. Darkness had been Nia's constant companion for days, yet within the suffocating shadows something new stirred, a pulse, faint but insistent, growing stronger with every heartbeat. She stirred on the cold stone floor of the cellar, her body weak, her spirit aching, yet something deep within called to her. She closed her eyes and let the rhythm of her blood guide her. At first she saw only crimson trails, streams of her own life that shimmered faintly in the shadows. But then the shapes began to twist and form, fleeting faces, small and glowing like sparks in the night. Her mind reached outward tentatively at first and she felt them, the 12 small presences born of her stolen blood. They shimmered in her vision, red-eyed and bright, each one tugging at her soul. She gasped, not in fear but in recognition. They were hers, her children of pain and vengeance, yet innocent, unformed without her guidance. She felt a deep bond, a tether of blood and memory that connected them to her as surely as the moon is tied to the tides. Images flowed through her mind. She saw Sephu at the festival, the tiny prick of the silver pin, the first drop of her blood spilling into the basin. She felt the hunger, the dark ritual that stole her life for beauty, and alongside it she felt the warmth of creation, the life that her pain had birthed. Each vision reminded her that her blood carried more than suffering now. It held balance, a strange weaving of her mother's blessing and the curse that had tried to break her. Justice and life intertwined in the red essence pulsing through her veins. Nia's eyelids fluttered open again. Her chest rose slowly, her body aching, yet she felt something unfamiliar: strength. The chains that had bound her wrists for so long, cold and unyielding, began to glow faintly. The iron softened as though touched by flame, twisting and melting away until the links fell silently to the floor. Her hands rose instinctively, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she stood on unsteady legs. Her eyes, once soft and human, now shimmered faint red, like the glow of the children she had birthed from her suffering. A soft humming filled the cellar, rising from the shadows. From the darkness, the 12 blood children emerged. They moved with a grace both eerie and beautiful, their small forms pulsing with the light of their creation. They knelt before her in perfect unison, their eyes shining like rubies in the dim moonlight. One of the smallest stepped forward, reaching out a tiny hand and whispered, "Mother, your vengeance awaits." Nia's chest tightened. She looked at the children, each one a reflection of the pain they had inherited, yet also of her resilience. The smallest boy's eyes flickered like embers, the smallest girl's form trembled with quiet power, and the others pulsed with energy she had yet to comprehend. She understood that they were not just instruments of revenge, they were extensions of herself, born from cruelty but capable of choice. She knelt to meet their gaze, her hands resting on the stone floor. "You were born from my blood," she said softly, her voice echoing like wind through the cavern. "But I am not a mother who raises killers blindly. We do not strike without purpose. We do not feed on hate alone. We bring truth and we bring balance." The children's small bodies seemed to shimmer at her words, their eyes brightening. "Yes, mother," they whispered in unison, voices like 1,000 tiny chimes. "We follow you." Rising to her feet, Nia felt the faint pulse of power coursing through her, the mingling of life and justice thrumming in her veins. Each step she took resonated through the cellar, awakening the shadows that had cowered at her presence. She could see the paths of her blood glowing faintly on the stone floor, winding toward the edges of the room, connecting her to each child. She lifted her hands and felt the energy flow through her fingertips, rippling outward to the 12 small beings before her. They tilted their heads, waiting, patient and obedient. Nia's eyes burned with quiet determination. "Remember," she said firmly, "we do not destroy for anger alone. We expose what must be seen. We bring the truth to light. Only then will justice be ours." The blood children nodded, their tiny hands pressed to their hearts as if pledging allegiance. The glow around them intensified, bathing the cellar in soft red luminescence. Nia took a deep breath, feeling for the first time that she was more than a victim, more than the blood that had been stolen. She was the blood mother, the harbinger of truth, the living proof that even stolen life could grow into power. And in the shadows, the whispers of the cellar answered back, carrying the promise of vengeance, of balance, and of a reckoning long overdue. The grand hall of Okuta shimmered with gold and crystal, filled with the scent of roasted meats, spiced wines, and perfumed candles. The nobles of the kingdom had gathered, their finest silks brushing against marble floors polished to perfection. At the head of the long table, Sephu reclined upon her gilded chair, radiant as ever, or so it appeared. Her laughter tinkled through the hall like delicate glass, a melody of charm meant to enchant and conceal the truth. Servants scurried past with platters of exotic dishes, and musicians played on harps and flutes, their notes rising and falling like waves. "This is the miracle of the century," Sephu purred to those nearest her. "Behold the eternal youth granted by the gods." She raised a goblet of crimson wine, the ruby liquid catching the candlelight, and the nobles echoed her words with awestruck admiration. But the mirrors lining the walls, placed there to reflect her beauty in infinite repetition, had begun to stir. Faint ripples moved across their silvered surfaces, as if the glass itself breathed. Slowly, subtly, the mirrors began to darken. A crimson stain appeared first at the edges, crawling inward like blood soaking through silk. The nobles, so entranced by the queen, initially did not notice. Only the servants, eyes wide with unease, whispered amongst themselves. "Did you see?" one murmured. But before another word could escape, the mirrors shivered violently. In the reflection of the largest mirror, Sephu's face began to change. Lines etched themselves across her skin, deepening with each heartbeat. Her cheeks hollowed, her eyes sunken and dull. Her lips cracked and darkened, her hair thinned and grayed before the eyes of the terrified onlookers. The radiant beauty that had captivated a kingdom twisted into a visage of decay, a crone whose youth had been stripped by the very magic she thought controlled her. The hall erupted in gasps. Servants dropped trays, nobles whispered and pointed. Some fled to the doors, clutching their robes. Sephu's laughter froze, replaced by a scream of disbelief and fury. She reached for the mirror, her fingers trembling, but her reflection did not move with her. The lines deepened, eyes burned with accusation, and her jaw dropped in silent horror. From the corners of the hall, 12 small figures emerged, stepping lightly from the shadows. The blood children, each glowing faintly with the crimson light of Nia's stolen blood, circled the tables with unnerving grace. They moved silently, their eyes locked on Sephu, their tiny forms flickering like flames in the candlelight. Each step they took seemed to echo with the hum of vengeance, vibrating through the marble floor and shaking the hearts of all who watched. Nia herself remained hidden from sight, her presence felt only through the children she had borne in blood and pain. The chains that had once bound her wrists no longer existed. Her eyes glimmered faint red, and a quiet power radiated from her, pulsing like a heartbeat. Through the children, her will extended into the hall, silent and unstoppable. King Duro, seated across the table, began to notice something he had long refused to see. His beloved wife, the woman he had praised for her beauty, for her grace, was no longer radiant. Her face, twisted by the truth of her crimes, stared back at him from the mirrors, accusing, unyielding. Delirium overtook him. He staggered from his chair, the golden goblet slipping from his trembling hand, wine staining the polished floor. "No, no," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "What have I done?" Sephu turned to him, her voice trembling with desperation. "Father, I am still beautiful. Do not listen, it is the work of shadows." But the blood children advanced, moving as one. The tallest lifted a tiny hand and pressed it against the nearest mirror. The glass shivered violently, spidering with cracks that spread across the surface like the veins of a dying leaf. A chilling hum filled the hall, resonating through the bones of every noble, servant, and guard. Sephu's reflection fractured further, each shard revealing a different aspect of her crimes. The theft, the curses, the bloodshed, all reflected back with merciless clarity. Nia's vengeance, channeled through her children, did not strike with violence but with revelation. Every lie, every act of cruelty was laid bare. The nobles shrank back, horrified, while King Duro fell to his knees, his body shaking. Shame and horror overwhelmed him, the illusions he had clung to shattered. He covered his eyes, unable to bear the truth of what he had allowed, and wept openly for his daughter and for the darkness he had enabled. Sephu's scream filled the hall as the mirrors continued to bleed, crimson light cascading over her body. The blood children's laughter, soft, eerie, triumphant, echoed through the cavernous space. The queen who had stolen life to preserve beauty now faced the mirror of her own deeds, powerless to escape the reflection that revealed everything she had tried to hide. In that moment, the hall of Okuta, once resplendent with false splendor, became a stage for reckoning. The blood children circled the hall, silent and vigilant, while the queen trembled, her eternal youth shattered, her face a reflection of the crime she could not undo. King Duro, humbled and broken, understood for the first time the depth of his daughter's suffering and the weight of his own blindness. Outside, the wind howled through the palace corridors, carrying with it the faint laughter of 12 small red-eyed figures who would not be ignored, who had risen from blood, darkness and truth.